screens, it's a plot to drop the IQ. Fighting amongst each other over rumors that don't like you. Prefer us trapped in melancholy with the wood ones of holly. Suggestions that obliterate to camouflage the folly. Attempted mental robbery, executed sloppily. The pomp preceded mockery and walk the talk with me. Put the hands up to touch the Akasha, cause you know deep down there's something bigger than your wallet.
Sweet eternal balance of all that is good, true, and beautiful, friends. Welcome back to Rogue Soul, where tonight it's the Christmas episode. Merry Christmas, everybody. It's that time of year. Just did the big solstice celebration and blessing. It was massive yesterday. Everyone who came, awesome. Such a great group, such a powerful session. I love doing these. I'm so grateful when I get to do these big blessings and these big events. So thank you to all of you. And now it has come. We're in the 3 days of darkness, and the Son of God is about to be reborn on the Southern Cross, is where it died. And then the light begins to return to the earth. Hallelujah. We can all celebrate that. The materialist reality is, of course, reflecting another aspect, which is the divine aspect, which is what actually all of reality is doing. Your body, your heart, your mind, your soul, society, politics, all of it. All of it is reflecting something much higher. It often gets lost down here in the material and the three-dimensional and the linear, and our focus on the physical. We often lose track of that higher level, but that's the level we want to, as consistently as possible, keep here in mind, in connection, in our hearts. And so the events I get to do, like the big bright solstice event last night, always helping us get back to that center, that connection, and that light. And then we get to move forward and carry that out into the world. So it's fantastic. But yeah, I love this time of year. It's my favorite time of year. I love Christmas. I love all of the lights. I love the festiveness. I love the gift giving. I love the family time. I love all of it. It's beautiful. And so we're going to get in tonight to the Christmas, what it is, what it isn't, why it might be important, and what to do about it, and why it is a spiritual war, in fact, that's been going on for centuries. And this isn't about religion. It's not about religion. I'm going to say it one more time for the people in the back. This is not about religion. It does express itself through religion in many ways, and that is important. But a lot of people get lost. They stop thinking immediately when they even think that I'm talking about Christianity. And I'm not talking about Christianity. I'm talking about Christ. I'm talking about the Christ principle. I'm talking about the reintegration of souls to source, to God, back to God through Christ. And that sounds very religious to people. I'm not in a church. I don't have a denomination. I am blessed to know Christ directly, and that transcends all religions. And so when I talk about Jesus or Christ, a lot of people just like turn off, because people have this weird trigger that's been embedded in our culture so effectively. It's insane that there's so many people who just shut down as soon as they hear Jesus or Christ or Christian or Christianity. And it's pretty ridiculous, actually. It's very childish. I did it for a time too. I did it actually until I was confronted by a demon, and Christ's name was the thing that saved me from it. Beyond my wildest dreams, not what I expected out of life, and no way did I even have a belief in any of those things before it happened to me. And then there I was experiencing it. So through direct experience and gnosis, I have come to know Christ. You guys have probably heard me talk about it before, so I won't tell the stories again. But beyond the religious view, beyond the denominational, I have known Christ. And so I got to explore it from a very direct level, which was a gift, because I got to transcend all the bullshit that makes many people shut down when they hear those words. And people are attached to all kinds of things. A lot of people are like, oh, it's the most violent, bloody, the Crusades and all of the violence done. And so Christianity is the worst, which isn't even remotely true, by the way. If you're just going by religions, which ones did the worst damage, Christianity doesn't even come close. And to this day, Christians are the most persecuted of any religion throughout history. These are just factually data. You can go look into it and figure it out yourself. So that's not even remotely true. One of the other things that people hold on to is the priests and the child abuse, which is horrible, right? Especially in the Catholic Church, we saw this happen. That's not Jesus, by the way. I don't know if you understood that you separate those things out, and that dark demonic energies infiltrate any structure they can. And so, yeah, a lot of dark stuff has happened within the church. By the way, Christianity, again, is not the worst offender in that category either, which is also just facts that you can go find out for yourself. So even if you wanted to hold Christianity specifically accountable for these alleged crimes that you see throughout history, then hopefully you're doing that to every other religion too. And if you did, you'd find perhaps actually what you'd do is you'd probably be drawn into atheism, which is the main goal of modern society's demonic aspects, is to draw you into atheism. And agnosticism, at least, is like you've got a sliver because you recognize there's something, you're just not sure what it is, right? Or how to describe it. But atheism, you go fully into the only thing that exists in the universe is matter, and that's it. And in true atheism, in fact, you would deny even that consciousness is non-local or transcendent, which is insane in my opinion. And in most scientists who are materialists or were materialists exactly end up at least at agnosticism, if not Christianity, or a love of Christ or the Christ principle, because they see that it's ridiculous to think that only matter exists, that there, in fact, has to be something beyond what we conceive of as matter, and that at least consciousness is it, and at least consciousness you can understand as transcendent because we've proven that it is non-local and transcends the material, is literally transcendent. So the least that gets you back into it. But atheism, it's actually this darkest hole that you can end up in, where you genuinely believe that all of this is just spinning matter that just happened to, come into this form and spew words and create civilizations. Again, actually insane. Because if you really believe that, there's something deeply disconnected within you that, I don't know how you got there, but I can see how you got there. Rather, I don't understand how you stay there. So these triggered responses to Christianity, they're very, very much serving something that isn't your highest good. So the more you can get beyond that, the better. A lot of people end up then at I'm spiritual. I'm just spiritual. That's all. And that's cool. I think people think that's where I'm at. I think people think that I'm a new age spiritual person because I do tarot and I do ceremonies and I do blessings and I do these things that I think to a lot of people seem not Christian, at least, right? And so I guess you're just a spiritual crystal girl or whatever. People don't have a category for me that's appropriate. And so they think that, and that's cool. Spiritual is cool. But if you go deep enough into spiritual and you have enough experience within it, it starts to also not quite be enough, right? And we're going to talk about why that's not quite enough. Part of it comes down to there is nothing that you can come back to rely on. There's nothing that can inform you directly of exactly what life is for, where it's headed, and why it is the way it is, right? And where all other things either fail you completely, then you need something else in its place, or you find that everything actually points you back to one thing, which we call Christ. You could call it anything else if you want. It's been called other things. But right now, in this moment of history, Christ is the most accurate and recent term that we use for this energy or consciousness that is transcendent, that does tell you exactly what to do and not to do, and exactly why everything is how it is, and where it's all headed. So it answers all the questions and it so happens to have power over evil. So very, very fascinating. Let's jump into Christmas and the spirit of it here on Rogue Soul. And I do invite you to my site, roguesoul.org. It is the place where you can get all of the books, get all of the classes that I teach, schedule one-on-one sessions if you want to go deeper into a tarot journey or a spiritual healing or a blessing or any of that. That's there under schedule. You can still do the 2026 tarot reading, by the way, get a look ahead at your year to come. That's just so helpful. It's so transformative. Even tarot readings, I say even tarot readings because they're sort of like, out of all my offerings, they're like the simplest, the most direct, straightforward, the easiest to access. And even those are deeply healing for people. I do sessions with people, I do a tarot reading, and they're having, emotions are coming out, they're having realizations, like they're going through some transformation. So the healing that gets to come through even a tarot reading is pretty great. I'm always grateful that I get to do this with you all. So schedule any of your sessions here. You can read the testimony of the people who have done so for years. You can look into the shop. There's some orgone there that's really powerful, uplifting for your space, helps with your prayer, your meditation, and your manifesting or any of that spiritual work you're doing. You can see all the places where Rogue Soul is on podcast and video and otherwise. Favorite Things is also one of my favorite places on the site. If you go there, a lot of these links are affiliate links that bring you in to get things like really high quality CBD from Organic Hemp Society. Phil's such a cool guy. It's a great company. They donate a bottle every time someone buys a bottle. They donate a product every time someone buys a product, and they do that for veterans, and it's really beautiful. True Sidereal Astrology with Athen Kamenti. And use these links, by the way, but also try the code Rogue Ways on any of these. You might get an extra discount. The links gives me a little benefit. The discount code gives you a little benefit. All of these things are things I use myself. So that's all there on the site, roguesoul.org. Also, the Substack, rogueways.substack.com is a great place to be subscribed for free. You get articles like this one, Christmas, Paganism, and Atheism. This is actually from a year ago. You can go all the way back through the archives. There's such great content here on the site on Substack. And again, you'll be updated for events like yesterday's Bright Solstice event and blessing. You'll get all of that here if you're subscribed at rogueways.substack.com. If you want to subscribe for the paid level, that's even better. For me, of course, you help support the show and all the work that I do. You help support all the free content I'm able to give to people, calling them back to their highest selves and their highest soul. And that's all very great. So be a paid subscriber, but you also get the channeled messages from spiritual ancestors that come through that are also incredibly healing, uplifting, and helpful as we go deeper and deeper into these earth transformations that you may have noticed through things like that strange fog and the planes that drop out of the sky and the sinkholes that are opening everywhere and the volcanoes and the earthquakes and on it will go. And they've been preparing us for that for years here so subscribers at the paid level have known that for years. So it's a good place to be connected here at rogueways.substack.com. But I wrote this last year, Christmas, Paganism, and Atheism. And so we'll start here. I said, you're not superior because you were fed and consumed the lie that Christianity is a plague and scientism is the cure. I grew up in this. I was a leftist. Everyone around me was leftist. And so Christianity was the worst. And Christmas was just this sick capitalist game that's played for a religion that was harmful. And all this stuff was that was the energy that was around me. So I kind of had to suppress this inner joy I actually have at this time of year. This being my favorite time of year. And I had to play sort of that role. I thought I believed it really is what's true, and so I wasn't lying. I just something in me was suppressed, something in me called out for something different, but that's the culture I was in, right? So I said, every year, atheists, pagans, heathens, and those in the cults of materialism and scientism rejoice in their superiority and barf a plethora of empty and meaningless cluster B garbage onto their fellow man because they believe Christianity is a hateful control mechanism thrust upon the masses by the psychopath class and a shackle long since requiring removal from our liberated bodies. Happy holidays, they scream back at you if you dare to utter a blessing and wish that they have a Merry Christmas. Keep your religious cult off of me, they snarl if you dare to sing a religious tune in their presence or play it on the radio of a store. I know because I used to participate in the same worthless behaviors. I know because I also used to pretend I was superior because of my chosen cult, that of communism, lacked a history of murder and devastation, oppression and witch hunts, suppression of progress, and human bonfires. Ignorant is what I actually was, and what these sociopathic wounded individuals also are. Ignorant to the truth that more harm and genocide has occurred under the auspices of atheistic, communistic, progressive movements than ever had under Christianity's collected inquisitions, pogroms, and crusades. Ignorant more so to the truth. None of these isms and belief systems are actually the root of any of the mass slaughter of humans. The destruction of civilization and humans under religions or any kinds of cult is a symptom, not a cause. The root cause of these horrors is the lack of understanding ourselves, nature, and the transcendental within the human consciousness, and realizing these aspects of being, thereby becoming able to rise up and move past the era of human suffering under powerful psychopathy. Is least likely under atheism, materialism, scientism, and modern progressivist movements. The same psychopath class that grabbed hold of the rising tide of Christianity before it was thus named is the same class of controllers that now urge you to abandon the irrational and find safe haven in the materialist worldview. In fact, these modernist movements aim to specifically strip the spiritual, the subtle, the immaterial, the magical, the supernatural from our shared experience entirely. The aim is to objectify all things, quantify them, reduce them to mechanism, and thereby equalize and sanitize the world from passion, from deep differentiation, and from the profound meaning found within the unique core of each personality and being on earth. They literally cannot create a lasting civilization, especially not by going backwards to the fear-based, superstitious, and externalized attempts at spirituality our ancestors flung out of the mud of history to become what we now call paganism or heathenism. And that is because those efforts end in what we now call Christianity. It's a natural progression of evolving consciousness. As Chesterton writes in Heretics, if anyone wants to hold the end of a chain which really goes back to the heathen mysteries, he had better take hold of a festoon of flowers at Easter or a string of sausages at Christmas. Everything else in the modern world is of Christian origin, even everything that seems most anti-Christian. The French Revolution is of Christian origin. The newspaper is of Christian origin. The anarchists are of Christian origin. Physical science is of Christian origin. The attack on Christianity is of Christian origin. There is one thing and one thing only in existence at the present day which can in any sense accurately be said to be of pagan origin, and that is Christianity. There are those, that was the end of his quote. There are those who would mistake me, and perhaps Chesterton too, in believing that I am saying that people should take up the religion of Christianity. If I am saying so, I do so only in the sense that you should never join a cult, but perhaps try to understand the actual mysteries of existence which Christianity directly addresses, helping us to transcend our base and material half in order to rise into the full potential of human beingness, as creation insists we do if we are to survive as a species. It is our birthright to sink so deeply into our soul and experience the truly sublime, and it is our evolutionary conclusion to leave behind that which insists we are a mere collection of cells, a mechanistic clump of chemicals, and a body thrown together by a random process of accidents. And to do so, to step into our highest throne of human achievement, which is to experience what Chesterton describes as the fullest possible enjoyment of reducing our ego to zero, to become the Christic consciousness described in the mysteries of the story of the Master Jesus, itself an echo of pagan grappling with nature's profound power, is to embody the conclusion of the processes of all materialist occurrences in any case. To rely on Chesterton one more time, the communist, cluster B, reductionist, materialist, and atheist can all, quote, ignore these great historic mysteries, the mystery of charity, the mystery of chivalry, the mystery of faith, ignore the plow or the printing press, but if they do revive and pursue the pagan ideal of a simple and rational self-completion, we shall end where paganism ended, end quote. And to be quite clear, he stresses, quote, I do not mean that we shall end in destruction. I mean that we shall end in Christianity, end quote. And he is right, because the mysteries that evade description with mere words and rely instead on symbolic, relational, experiential transcendence of the physical and movement into pure consciousness will forever be reflected in every layer of this hollow fractal universe of creation in which we exist. Even if you refuse to understand that you are more than the individual processes of physical cause and effect that make up your body, you will continuously bring your eyes back to the heavens to see the story of Christ played out in the stars, and you may even find the story retold within the table of elements, or if you're very lucky, you will see it within the structures and functions of your own body. By the way, I'll pause here from the reading to say those are all things that you can actually go find and study, that the story of Christ is told in your body, the story of Christ is told in the stars, the story of Christ is told in the chemical elements table, and it literally is told. It's not some far-flung thing someone just happened to string together and force to fit the story. It's as though our bodies were made to tell the story of Christ. It's as though the stars were written to tell the story of Christ. It's as though the chemical element table was made to fit the story of Christ, not the other way around. And so I encourage you to do so. You can read The Word Made Flesh. You can look into astrotheology, and a lot of people get the wrong idea when they do so. They look into astrotheology and they say, oh, Christianity is just our mistaken, our historical attempt to tell the story of the stars so that we know when to plant and when to harvest and when the sun is going to start shining longer and the days will stop getting darker. No, it actually just so happens that it actually does tell the story of an actual living Christ that actually lived that out. It is trying to show you that at every level of creation, from the sciences to the stars to your body to everything, reflects the same single truth, which is that you are a creation that was spiritual to begin with, descended into matter, and will return to the light, just like Jesus did. Not an accident. So I'll return to the reading now. I said, if you're very discerning and intelligent, you will understand that when I say Merry Christmas to you, I mean to say that I'm utterly grateful that we exist with consciousness intact to behold the impossibility of our existence. I am in literal awe of our vision to see the ineffable beauty of this creation. I am humbled beyond words with these ears to hear the music of the spheres, cymatically creating physical structure. I'm overwhelmed by our potential to be born again, egoless and in harmony with all that exists, finally able to rekindle the magic underlying all things. For this is Christ, and yes, he is King forever and ever, reborn in every heart anew with every awakening received. So Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. And every time someone says to me, when I say that, I don't celebrate Christmas, I'll say, I didn't ask you. I told you what I celebrate. I don't care if you like it. I'm not speaking to you wondering what it is you want. I'm telling you what I'm feeling. Merry Christmas, right? How selfish of you to assume that I should first stop and learn everything about you and then say something that is perfectly crafted to everything you already think, say, and do. How selfish. No, instead, I'll tell you what I'm feeling, which is what we should be doing every time we're speaking. Here's what I think. Here's what I'm feeling. That's not selfish. That's honest. It's selfish of you to want me to do something other than what I am, to be something other than what I am. That's called narcissism. Deal with it. Merry Christmas. And so I also, I think Christianity, I know Christianity, not in the religious sense, in the sense of everything I just said, which is a reflection of just the universe as it is. That type of Christianity, which means to be Christ-like. Not to go to a church, to believe what a pastor says, to follow whatever you were taught, whatever dogmatically. No, that's not what Christianity means. The word itself means to be Christ-like. So if you understand the Christ concept, the Christ principle of the universe, from a materialistic level all the way up to the spiritual level and every form that's reflecting it in a holofractal way, that's Christianity. When I say Christianity, that's what I mean. Clip that. That's what I mean. So Christianity. So get with it, right? Get rid of whatever else is in your head and listen to what I'm actually saying. Christianity is actually necessary for our society, for our survival. As I said in that article, it's necessary for humanity to survive, actually. Christianity is. And so, we have actual statistics, studies about this. And one of them is highlighted in this wonderful book, as far as I remember it, which was a long time, literally 25 years ago, I read this book. So don't hold me to specifics. But in general, the book Bowling Alone by Robert Putnam talks about this, right? And so here's an AI summary of it. It says, this book argues that American civic engagement and social connections, or social capital, have significantly declined since about the 1950s. Even though people are still active in individual pursuits like bowling, but not in leagues. So he calls it Bowling Alone because bowling leagues are one of the easiest ways to look at our declining social cohesiveness, social capital, or social connection. But one of the things he talks about is church going. Church going also has ceased in the same way that bowling leagues have ceased, as the same way as baking clubs and all these community organizations have ceased since the 1950s. And I'll ask you, just if you just think about life from the 1950s till now, despite whatever you think about being able to break some of the molds and have a little bit more personal freedom and have a greater ability to express ourselves, perhaps, aside from that, is life better? In general, I think most people would say, no, not really. Like, aside from the fact that we are definitely more accepting of difference, and that can be counted as a great good, in general, we have declining social cohesiveness. We have declining culture, declining shared culture, and declining group experiences. We're actually starved for connection in this age where you can get online and seem to have a sort of connection with millions of people, but none of it's really real. None of it's face to face, and none of it matters. And all that's left is school and work. And that was never what we were made for. Those things might be great, sure, but that was never what we were actually made for. The community organizations, the bowling leagues, the baking leagues, the Christian churches, the organizations like these that we actually went to and participated in with our neighbors and our communities, that's actually what life's about, right? Aside from having your family, raising your family, developing yourself as a person, life is about our connection with each other and the things we do together. And those things have so steeply declined, you might be laughing because maybe you've never even had any of that in your life. And that's really sad. It's really sad, right? Whether you like bowling or whether you like baking or like churches isn't the point. The point is, we had a shared culture that was strong enough that you knew, oh, I can join a bowling league. I'll have friends there. I can go to church. I'll have a community there. I can do these things, and the people will be doing this. And now, what do you have? The few organizations I'm a part of in real life or face to face have so few people in them. And yes, you can go to church. You can find lots of people there, but the number of churches and the number of people who go to them have steeply declined. We're having a resurgence right now. There's actually a huge resurgence. People have started going to church, specifically since Charlie Kirk's assassination, has had this sort of uplifting of Christianity and church going. And so, I actually think that's great. It's really necessary for people to have this sort of connection. I think it's great to go find a church you like and join it. It doesn't, again, have anything to do with religion. I could care less which religion you chose. It's not really true. My preference is that you would choose one of the Christian ones, because we'll get to that actually in this episode about why, but that'd be great. But just to have anything, any connection, we have so little of it. So this book is one of many people and books and works that are pointing to this stagnation in our social life, stagnation in our connection to each other that is deeply harmful to people. At the same time, we can see the rise in anxiety and depression and social lack of cohesion and division amongst people, hatred of your neighbors for who they voted for example. And that used to not really be the case. I was talking to a leftist recently, and they were saying, it's so sad how little we're able to like overcome the divide between like the left and the right and the whatever is perceived in political and social divides. And I said, yeah, well, part of that is that we used to know it didn't matter, and now people have been fed and consumed and taken in this lie that it matters deeply. It matters so much that I know who you vote for, so I can hate you for it or love you for it and discard you if needed. Whereas back in the day when we were in a bowling league together, we were in a baking league together, we were in these different charities together, we were in churches together, we knew for sure it didn't matter who you voted for because I'm still your neighbor and I'm still going to love you and be here with you doing this thing. In fact, we didn't talk about who we voted for because we knew it might divide us. Now we're on the exact other side where we have nothing connecting us, and we use this thing to divide ourselves. It's deeply destructive. So yeah, things like Christianity, if you do want to join a church, can transcend that. And the best churches will even say, leave your politics at the door. That's not what we're here to do. The worst ones tell you who to vote for and tell you that you'll burn in hell if you don't. That's pretty disgusting. So, why it is actually important that we have these shared connections, these community organizations, these bowling leagues and the like, because we need a shared culture. It's actually crucial. And it's funny, I was talking to Corey yesterday before the Day Zero episode, and he was saying, you know what, I'm kind of realizing like we might need Christianity. We might need this because we need a shared culture, because without one, we're going to crumble and fall apart. And I was like, man, when Corey says this, like this is right, like, yeah, but it's true. And he's right. We actually desperately need this. It's actually the thing that causes you to be able to overcome any sort of attack from the outside, is when you have a shared culture, a shared identity, and some sort of cohesion. Even at the base layers, even AI here can tell you, right, that shared culture provides identity, cohesion, support, unites people through common values, beliefs, traditions, and language, and fosters belonging, facilitates cooperation, guides behaviors, enriches lives by offering support, sparking curiosity, and providing pathways to understanding peaceful coexistence, even as it shapes personal development and community resilience. What could be negative about that? Nothing. We actually need it. It's important for individuals, for communities, for society and connection. We don't know where we're going if we don't have something that binds us together. And right now, we don't have it as Americans. People are so deeply divided about what it even means to be American, or if America is even good or not, which we used to not have a problem with. And thinking America is good and worth saving and worth fighting for is not the same as saying everything it's ever done is great and I accept it exactly as it is. It's saying it's worth fighting for. It's worth salvaging. If there's something wrong with it, it's worth trying to fix. That's all it means. I think people have this weird delusion, like they have to say everything America's ever done, everything it's doing, I stand for, I'm a patriot. No, I'm a patriot because I think we can do better than this, because I think it's a pretty good start and we can do even better than this. That's what a patriot is. And yeah, a lot of our systems are deeply corrupted and horribly broken, and they're worth salvaging. And we can do that, but we can only do it together, and we can only do it if we value being Americans. And better than that would be if we valued being Americans with a shared Christian culture, which is what we actually have. It doesn't mean, again, in the exact same vein, it does not mean that you say all Christian churches and everything Christianity's ever done, I stand for. It means you say, yeah, I can get down with celebrating these things throughout the year. I can get down with having this place where people can come and connect with each other. I can get down with the community of it. I can get down with the general principles of connection, community, goodwill towards your fellow man, right? The idea that people can be redeemed and are worth saving. These sorts of general things, like I can be down with that. That can be a shared culture for me. That's what it means. You can then bring in the Christ consciousness and the raising of consciousness and all of these things. You can get into the mystery side of it, the mystic side of it. You can get into any aspect you want. Or you can leave all of that behind and say, no, I'm just here for the community. It's cool. I'm good enough with the general principles. It's cool. But that would be even better. So you could say, I'm an American, I'm a patriot, and I'm a Christian. Even better. Those things trigger people so hard. I'm sure that people hear me say that and they just cast me off instantly and dismiss me because they have no idea what I'm saying. They can't understand the bigger picture. The greatest minds I've ever found have reflected the same principle, which is that you don't actually have to believe every detail of it or buy into every aspect or have no criticisms in order to see that this is for the good of your culture and humanity. That supersedes whether or not you believe in all the details or agree with every mistake made. That supersedes it. It's for the highest good. Clip that. So it gives you identity and belonging. You need that. If you don't find it somewhere good, you're going to find it somewhere dark, right? You're going to become an anarchist, furry atheist. I'm serious, right? You're going to fall into the deepest aspects of ego and immorality. You're going to fall into your lowest nature because you've got nothing to bring it back up. You've got nobody here to support you and call you back to the light. I'm not saying all furries, all atheists, all whatever. I'm not saying that. I'm saying those things don't generally lead people to good outcomes. And these things do, right? Support and resilience, guidance and morality, personal growth, unity and cohesion, understanding and empathy, communication and cooperation, learning and curiosity, shared activities, telling stories, cultural exchange, all those things you get from this. Where people start to have a hard time too is when they meet someone who's super dogmatic and controlling, right? Like, well, you have to think like this and do like this. Well, you don't. It doesn't matter who that person is. It could be a priest. It could be someone in the community. And all you have to do is say, no, I think it's this. Yeah, I could go to a church right now and they could be like, Christ is like this. I can be like, well, Christ is like this for me. And they can be like, that's, blasphemy. And I say, oh, I don't really care what you think about it, right? It's me. It's my idea. It's my connection. It has nothing to do with you. You don't have to give in to the dogmatists ever. It's your life, right? But to realize that this transcends that is more important than that. Well, that's something that's very adult to do, right? And it's something you might have to heal your wounds in order to get towards, especially if you're automatically triggered at Christ, Christian, patriot, and these things. You've been deeply programmed and you've got to heal that. People go into this whole like, oh, your imaginary God in the sky, the imaginary guy in the sky. And like, yeah, I used to do that too. And oh, you're so funny and witty. Well, you're not. There's very few people who actually have like a personified God in their head. Like that God's like a dude somewhere. That'd be such a limited, ridiculous view of what God is. It's like what children start with. But as you grow, you're like, well, what is God really, right? And God is like a force, and God is like a concept, and God is like the highest you can imagine, and that's not even close to what God is. But like you're getting closer now, right? So like that whole thing where you like mock that, I mean, like it's ridiculous on its face, and nobody's really there but you. So like you got to get over it, right? Like you've got to heal yourself. Shared cultural values are important no matter what culture we're talking about. If you're over in India, I'd be like, yeah, be a Hindu, join the Hindu thing, like go to yoga or whatever, do the river, like do all that. I'm saying like you've got to have a shared culture, you've got to have connection, you've got to have these values that make your culture able to withstand the destructive forces that absolutely exist in the universe and want you to suffer. You have to. You don't, you just suffer. And that's your choice. Just telling you. We have to have shared language. We have to have shared morals. We have to have shared expectations of each other. This is the thing too. You look back at like, why did we say you've got to get married and then not get divorced? Because we have to have some standards, because otherwise society does actually start to fall apart. And I just saw this really interesting thing. And I think it's always worth questioning, especially those things that we feel like we can't question or that we've never questioned. And I saw this on Black Pigeon Speaks. He's on YouTube. You can go find him, and he did this little exploration of, does female promiscuity sort of alert you to the end of a civilization? Does it lead to the end of civilization? And it's not like really targeting women. It's actually like men and women are both complicit in this. But it's exploring this sort of modern world we have, where women have been sort of liberated, so called, to just have sex with anybody they want as many times as they want, and the damage it's doing to the ability to have families and structure and shared culture and a strong society. And so it's a really interesting exploration. And the reason I say we should explore those things, because especially for me, some part of me is triggered, like, why are you blaming women? Or like, why can't women be within? Like, women are empowered and like all this stuff. I have that part of me still. And so it's especially worth then, right, like investigating what it is in me that's triggered and what this person's actually saying. And do they have a valid point? And yeah, in listening to that, I thought, I think you do have a valid point. I think there is a reason that we say, yeah, the ideal is that you should have someone commit to them and stick with them. That's actually the ideal. And sure, something will happen and somebody will end up with the wrong person and whatever. And yeah, great. So get a divorce. Cool. I get it. And ideally, that doesn't happen. Ideally, you have a person, you have a commitment, you create a family, and you stick with it. That's the best for civilization. It's the best maybe for you in many ways. So these are the things, right? When we start to lose those things, we start to lose our society. What do we have now? What do we share now? What are our expectations of each other? Can we trust them? No. Right now, no, we can't. We don't know. What is anyone valuing? What are they doing? What are their goals? Are there commitments that people are making that we can rely on? And for the most part, the answer is no, we don't, because we've lost all of this. Right? And so as much as possible, while maintaining that humans are free and you should have the ability to free yourself of any oppressive situations, and you should have the ability to do what's best for you in your life, that's all going to be true forever, eternally. And the shared value might be best if it were, you're going to get married and have a family, and you're going to be committed to it, and it's going to be your main goal in life. And in that, we'll have this community that supports each other through hard times. And in that, we're going to value being charitable to each other, loving to each other, uplifting for each other, right? Focused on our own self-growth and highest consciousness, focused on eradicating those things within us that are not healthy or well. That those are the things that we could have as our shared culture, and that all of those things are embedded in Christianity. And G.K. Chesterton is one of the people who is the biggest proponents of this, of Christmas and Christianity and Christ, in a very similar way to me, and to C.S. Lewis and to J.R.R. Tolkien, and to all of these people that recognize that you might, and the most of them, by the way, came from atheism to Christianity. They came from atheism and academia and high thinking and literature to Christianity. And they did it in a very similar way to me, where it was not their default. They didn't have that as their primary thought or goal or in their heart, but they were sort of forced eventually to recognize that it is the logical conclusion. That a truly intelligent person that thought deeply enough about humans, civilization, and society would come to these same conclusions. That people actually need Christianity. They actually need the cohesion of a culture. They actually need traditions like Christmas that bind them together in order to survive life and the forces that would love to drag you down into the mud and leave you there. And so I love them. I love reading G.K. Chesterton. He does it better than I could ever do it. I love reading C.S. Lewis. He does it better than I could ever do it. I love that they're like me and that Christianity was not in their makeup and they were forced to accept it like I was, deeply resistant to it. There it was. And there I couldn't avoid it over and over again, over and over again, over and over again. Not what I wanted. G.K. Chesterton AI Overview tells us, saw shared culture rooted in common sense, tradition, and the sacredness of the ordinary man and family life. Opposing modern rootlessness and intellectual arrogance that dismissed the wisdom of everyday people in history, he believed a strong culture came from shared beliefs, locality, and practices like family meals. Recognizing shared humanity transcends divisions like race or nation. For Chesterton, true unity comes not from mixing everything, but from respecting defined boundaries and shared loves, finding the miraculous in the mundane. I couldn't say it better than Chesterton says it, and AI's done a decent job of summarizing him. And so it's so important. He championed a culture built on tangible shared experiences, ancestral wisdom, and the profound beauty of the common everyday life, viewing it as the antidote to modern spiritual decay. He's saying, yeah, when you really dig in, when you love your neighbor, when you connect with them, when you have this shared culture, when you have traditions that you all do, we all put up lights on our house. It's a shared tradition, right? We all put up a wreath. It's a shared tradition. We all go to church and we, have these values. These are shared ideals. And when you do this and you focus on just yourself and the best that you can be, and then your family and the best family you can create, that is the essence of life and of civilization and of humanity, is the thing that matters most, and that Christianity enshrines those things, that no other religion has done that. And in fact, most other religions seem to go back to Christianity, and we'll get to that too. And so it's important. It's important. That's why Christianity is important. Outside of all of the dogmas, outside of all of the, supposed abuses, outside of all of that, this is why Christianity is important. By the way, again, I don't have a religion or a church, but I call myself a Christian because I have, since I was saved by the word and the name of Christ from demonic control and possession, I have aimed to be Christ-like. I have aimed to make myself as good, as pure as possible. And every time I find a fault in myself, I do my best to ask for the support from the spiritual world in order to overcome that and then become even better and more pure. My life has only gotten better for this. Every year I say, people are like, oh, we're all older on our birthday. And I'm like, no, I'm excited. I'm blessed to get to this age. And every year of my life so far has been better than the one before it because of this. And so I'm excited to see what comes next. Right? So then I had this thing too where I was like, was Christmas actually that important? And whatever, was it, and I watched this movie recently. It was so interesting because I'm always looking for more Christmas movies. I like to be in the Christmas spirit and do the Christmas thing. Like I said, it's my favorite time of year. And so what Christmas movies have I not seen before? Are any of them good? And so I'm watching some of the oldies, and I found this one that said The Man Who Invented Christmas. I was like, what's this? And it was a Charles Dickens, and I expected it to just be a sort of retelling of A Christmas Carol, right? No, it was actually really good. And I love that actor. He was also in oh god, now I can't remember the name of it, but he's pretty cool. And so if you go look this up and find The Man Who Invented Christmas, you might enjoy it. And it's basically about Charles Dickens. It takes a little bit of liberty with his life, right? But in general, the pieces of the story are true. And that is that Dickens was sort of struggling. He was financially not doing that great because he had 3 books in a row that didn't do so well. And so he was, already this sort of acclaimed author, but his books were sort of bombing. And then he got this sort of inspiration to do A Christmas Carol. And it's all of his same sort of morals that are within this, the Christian morals, and especially charity and a focus on the family at Christmas and some Christmas traditions. And what's interesting is the way that it was presented was that these traditions had been dying, and that Christmas itself as a popular holiday had been dying. And so around the 1820s or 1840s or so, whenever this was, it was like declining in importance and popularity, and nobody really cared about Christmas. And that blew my mind. I didn't know we went through a period of time where Christmas was dying and people didn't love it. I was like, what? That's crazy, right? Because right now, even in this insanely anti-Christian culture that we have right now, even now, Christmas is still so important. but back then it was dying. So he wrote A Christmas Carol. And what's fascinating to me too is that, A Christmas Carol, it's like the ghost of Christmas past and present and future, and story of redemption, and the Scrooge character like gets to reclaim himself and do better and be more charitable. And so it's a beautiful story. The reason it captured everyone's interest is people at that time were so into ghosts and monsters and the paranormal, and that was sort of starting to win the day. And by the way, those things are all real, but what's fascinating is a lot of them get people into the demonic, whether they know it or not. And so it was almost like the demonic was almost winning. And here came Dickens to reclaim things for the light and bring people back to caring about the poor, caring about the welfare of your fellow man, right? Giving goodness and light in order to uplift people, spending time with your family, valuing the time with your family, valuing your family and loving them. And that all brought Christmas back. Christmas came back from the dead because of A Christmas Carol and Dickens. So it was super cool. It was a great movie. It was a great story to know because I didn't know that before. And there really was this waning popularity of Christmas and this revival because of this book. And the book, as you know, obviously was a fantastic hit. He was able to, meet his financial obligations and overcome them. But also we've had this story now. You've probably heard it a million times in a million ways, from the Muppets to like Broadway to, all these different versions of this story. Such a great story. All those values are important. That's our culture, right? And so he brought back this shared culture, this shared Christian culture of caring about each other, caring about ourselves, caring about our souls, and being connected in that, having shared traditions and values. What a beautiful thing. And so G.K. Chesterton on Christmas, he says, "What life and death may be to a turkey is not my business, but the soul of Scrooge and the body of Cratchit are my business." Right? Going back to A Christmas Carol, Scrooge and Cratchit. These are my business, he says. What is important is the human soul. What is important is my fellow man and myself, and that we can rise up together in our highest selves. He says Christmas is built upon a beautiful and intentional paradox that the birth of the homeless should be celebrated in every home. Right? Because Jesus, the story of Jesus, that they were homeless. He was born in a barn or a cave, depending on which story you go with, right? And didn't have a place to be. And yet every home person celebrates Christmas. Not quite true from the time of Chesterton. Our shared culture has declined, like we've said. Not everyone, and in fact, a lot of people are very, very specifically, deeply anti-Christian, not just not Christian, anti-Christian. And we'll get deeper into that too. But yeah, some of these beautiful quotes by Chesterton just remind you how beautiful sharing culture, having Christmas in our society really is. C.S. Lewis, again, another person who's not a Christian, was brought into Christianity against his will, against his logic. He's a very academic, logical person. And here he is, eventually one of the largest proponents of Christianity that we've ever had in our culture. And so here he is, also talking about Christianity or Christmas itself. He says C.S. Lewis viewed Christmas as a crucial Christian festival celebrating the incarnation of Christ, contrasting its deep spiritual meaning with the commercial Xmas, right? Just decrying the sort of commercialization of it all, which is another part that a lot of people have a lot of resistance around Christmas, right? Like, oh, Hallmark and all this, we're supposed to buy all this stuff and it's so capitalist. And yeah, that's a fair criticism. It's a fair criticism, right? But it's no reason to cast out Christmas itself, as C.S. Lewis said. He embraced the festive traditions, merrymaking, hospitality, shaped by his own journey from atheism to faith. His writings, such as Reflections on God Descending and A Christmas Sermon for Pagans, delve into the profound theological significance of Christ's birth. While stage shows like A Christmas with C.S. Lewis capture his witty storytelling about these themes, and his Oxford Christmas Life, incorporating elements from Narnia, like Father Christmas. So he's a very mystical Christian, very sort of like G.K. Chesterton, reclaiming the pagan aspects of Christianity while also showing how Christian they are and how important Christianity is. So very interesting people in this sort of vein. But yeah, he also loved Christmas and this ability it had to draw us together and have this shared common culture, but draw us into our highest selves, our highest minds, or our Christ consciousness, as I would call it. And so, he gave that sermon, that sermon to pagans, which is really interesting. Part of it, he says, suppose about nature, suppose she is only a machine and that we are free to master her at our pleasure. Have you not begun to see that man's conquest of nature is really man's conquest of man? That every power wrested from nature is used by some men over other men? Men are the victims, not the conquerors in this struggle. Each new victory over nature yields new means of propaganda to enslave them, new weapons to kill them, new power for the state, and new weakness for the citizen, new contraceptives to keep men from being born at all. It's really interesting, right? He's saying like paganism is a worship of sort of nature or just living in nature. And whatever leads us to this place where we're almost like conquering nature, looking at nature as mechanistic, and that this only does damage to us, right? And he goes on to talk about the death of the West and how the death of the West is sort of this terrible loss of moral standards and spiritual desert, as he described it. This is back in 1946, by the way. So imagine like how much further we've gotten. And already at that time, he saw the West dying because of a loss of moral standards and cultural cohesiveness and understanding of the Christian values and the Christian culture that we are a part of, whether we like it or not. We talk about the WASPs, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, and the, whatever. This is a Christian nation, and the Western nations are Christian nations. You don't like it, I don't care. It's true. So you need to get over it. You need to find a way to understand and accept it and then get beyond it. And it is not your best service to reject it, right? The best service to yourself is to be able to integrate it in some way because it's a part of you, right? So he talks about this decay, the de-Christianization, losing Christ, losing the true God, human beings losing themselves. Losing ourselves. I talk about this all the time, right? We don't understand ourselves. We don't understand our connection to nature. We don't understand our connection to each other. Then we are never going to understand our soul or the ability that we have to rise into our highest selves in nature, to salvage humanity from the dustbin of history and to keep civilization going, right? We're saying the same things. He's saying it in a different way than me. But I come more and more to these ideas of people like Lewis and Chesterton. I come more and more to this understanding that it really is the cultural glue that holds us together, and it will not serve us to start over and create something new, because Christianity wasn't that either. Christianity was not entirely new. As Chesterton said, Christianity was the end result of paganism. We've already progressed to Christianity. If we progress beyond, it'll be through Christianity, not despite it. Clip that. Our battle, he says, for democratic ideals against Nazi ideals has been a waste of time because the one is no better than the other. Nor can there ever be any real improvement or deterioration. If there is no real goal, you can't get either nearer to it or farther from it. In fact, there is no real reason for doing anything at all. And that's a shocking statement to some people. They're like, of course, democracy is better than Nazism. No, he's saying it's not unless you have a goal. And what is your goal? And people don't have one if they don't have a shared culture. As a culture, civilization, and society, we don't have a goal if we don't have a shared culture. Once we have our shared culture, we have a goal now. And that's what he's saying. And we are Christians of a Christian nation, and Christianity is the outgrowth of everything that came before it. And so through Christianity, we find our shared goal, which is essentially to transcend our base nature and be spiritual minded in connection with each other. It's a very basic level of it. That's what we're saying, right? Simple, actually. He says it's the only cure. The heart of Christianity, he says, is a myth, which is also a fact. The old myth of the dying God, without ceasing to be myth, comes down from the heaven of legend and imagination to the earth of history. It happens at a particular date in a particular place, followed by definable historical consequences. We pass from a Balder or an Osiris dying nobody knows when or where to a historical person crucified under Pontius Pilate. By becoming fact, it does not cease to be myth. That is the miracle. Chesterton talks about this. Lewis talks about this. My channeling of the spiritual ancestors talk about this, that if it wasn't a paradox, it wouldn't be true. That the truest things in all reality are the biggest paradoxes. And here is another one, that the Christ myth was told many times throughout history and is now told again as Christ going through the same death and rebirth, the same saving of humanity again. And he's saying, just because it was myth before and is fact now does not make it not miraculous. It makes it more miraculous. This is what I was saying about the periodic table of the elements, or the fact that you can read the story of Christ in your body. It's not an accident. It was made to reflect the same story, because the same story is your story. It's you. It's the same story as humanity's story. It's that even if we seem to be crushed, we can be reborn. We can reclaim ourselves from our lowest nature. We can rise into our highest selves. We can do better than we've ever done before, and that it matters deeply, and it saves all of ourselves and all of the world when we do it. That's the story. That's the story of Christ. And it was a real person, and it is within you. And it was a real person who lived it, and it is told many times before he got here. And that it is a real person who lived it, and it is written in the stars. All of that is true. You don't have to pick just one. That's the miracle. If you've never experienced a miracle, I'm sorry for you. If you've never understood that things that are miraculous transcend linear and logic, linear reality and logic, I'm sorry for you. Once you experience it, you can't unexperience it. You can't unknow it. And you start to really understand the mystery of our existence and our transcendence. Clip that. So he says the Gospels contain a fairy story, or a story of a larger kind, which embraces all the essences of fairy stories. They contain many marvels, peculiarly artistic, beautiful, and moving, mythical in their perfect self-contained significance. And among the marvels is the greatest and most complete conceivable eucatastrophe. But this story has entered history and the primary world. The desire and aspiration of sub-creation has been raised to the fulfillment of creation. The birth of Christ is the eucatastrophe of man's history. The resurrection is the eucatastrophe of the story of the incarnation. This story begins and ends in joy. It has preeminently the inner consistency of reality. There is no tale ever told that men would rather find was true, and none which so many skeptical men have accepted as true on its own merits. I'm the skeptical person who eventually accepted this. He's the skeptical person who eventually accepted this. G.K. Chesterton is the skeptical person who eventually accepted this. J.R.R. Tolkien is the skeptical person. People often begin in their skepticism, and then when the miracles occur for them, when their experience demands it, when their logic demands it, they're forced to accept that this thing that seemingly makes no sense is actually the truth. And that's the miracle. And we're all on that path, even if you'd like to use different words to describe it. It's nice when we can share the culture of it together, though. And so he talks about all over the world, people will gather on the 25th to remember this story, remember this truth of who they are, that they can be redeemed from any state, no matter how fallen, that they can rise up into their highest selves, no matter the mistakes they've made in the past, that it matters deeply that they're here to help create the future of humanity and society together, and that our shared connection is the thing that does that. That is the essence of Christ's story and of Christianity. Clip that. That's C.S. Lewis. And so I love it. I love that we have shared tradition. You know, I was thinking of this, of Christmas songs and how much I love them. And I love them because even though we weren't super Christian. We didn't have this hardcore belief, and I wasn't required to go to church or think about anything at all about Christianity or Christ or whatever. I was very free in my upbringing. I'm very grateful for that. So we didn't have, but we had Christmas because it's a tradition, right? Because everybody had Christmas. And because we weren't some other religion. And so, the vast majority, again, the West is Christian. We have Christmas, we have Christmas traditions. And so we had these songs and I loved them. And I love them still because I loved them, because they were our tradition, because every year we break out the record player and play the White Christmas album, right? And some of these albums that we had. And so I knew all these songs and we sang all these songs and we loved all these songs. And now I can sing them too. And I was thinking, how can you have this divinely transcendent experience of singing with other humans, which is what it is? If you can sing with other humans, your heart will synchronize with theirs, your breath will synchronize with theirs, even though you have different sizes of lungs and people and heart needs and all of this, they will synchronize because it's an amazing transcendent experience to sing with other people. It is one of the greatest things you can do. It is a cultural connection that goes beyond, are you Democrat or Republican, or do you believe in this version of Jesus or that, or do you take this sacrament or not, or which denomination, or you could transcend all those things. And in a very human, physical, real way, we are instantly connected, transcending all those things. It's magic to sing with people. And how can you sing with people if you don't have traditional songs together? Now you're starting from square one, and now you're like, here's this random song, and what does it even mean, and what is it, which values is it espousing, and what are the words, and what does it sound like? And now I have to memorize it. Now we can sing together. Well, that's a lot to go through to get to where we already were with all these songs. We have all these songs and we get to sing them together. That transcends everything. How sad for someone if they think that it's cool to reject Christianity and our Christian roots and our Christian culture in order to just feel superior in some smug, silly, wounded way, instead of saying, what a joy it is that I get to sing these songs with my brethren and have this connection that is a value we share, in which we know that we're going to be here for each other in a meaningful way. God bless us having these songs. What a great gift we've been given from our ancestors. Let's use it. Clip that. All these songs are wonderful. I've been remembering them. I listen to them so I can remember the words. I've been trying to memorize the words even more because I think it's important and it matters and it's fun. And I love Christmas. So Christmas decorations as well, and traditions. I love them. I have this tiny little house. I wish I had more space so I could have more Christmas things. I wish that I could have a space for Christmas lights and a Christmas tree. I have no space for any of that, so I don't get to have any of that stuff. I have a wreath on my front door, and I have a tiny little shelf where I have a big collection of like the few decorations we have room for, and that's it. Someday I'm gonna have way better Christmases, but I love what I have. I love that I get to do just that. That's fun too. But I love this is another shared thing, like I said, that you can drive around and see the lights, that you can see the wreaths on people's houses, that you can know people have Christmas trees and know they're not non-denominational, seasonal tree shapes or whatever they're calling them now at every place that you can buy them, but they're Christmas trees and they represent something and they're meaningful and they're the way that we come together. So I love it. Stockings, gingerbread, gift giving, Santa Claus, even the movies and music, even the stuff that is sort of materialistic and corporatized. Oh, well, it's fun. Let yourself enjoy it. Ice skating, sledding, festive meals, holiday baking, church services, nativity scenes, caroling. All of this stuff is beautiful, and it's togetherness and it's our connection. And I love it. By the way, their most destructive religion that we know of in history is actually Islam. And yes, not all Muslims. And yes, there's very good Muslims. And yes, you might even say 80% of Muslims are great and westernized in the sense that they do not want to kill everyone who isn't Muslim. But historically and still today, Islam is the most violent and dangerous religion. And it has spread so far over the globe. This map that you see is the spread of Islam as of the 1700s, I want to say, when I looked this up and opened it. It's way bigger than that now. It goes all the way over into China. It goes all the way down into most of Asia. It's got some roots now in Australia, all of Africa, and the UK. That doesn't mean they're 100% Muslim. It means that holy war has spread, not always violently, but almost always violently, that jihadis have moved in and slaughtered and raped and forced the religion on people. And so if you want to choose Islam as your shared culture, that's great. That's fine. You have the freedom to do that. And I will say that it is actually more violent than Christianity ever was. Actually, still today, actively violent in a way that Christianity never has been, and very destructive. And it has the ability to be radicalized quite easily. So even if you think, well, that's all higher powers using Islam and radicalizing people and terrorism, and that's us when we went in and destabilized areas and their only response was to become radicalized, you might tell yourself those things. And part of that is a part of the story, but it is not the only part of the story. And it's definitely not the only part that matters. And it's not okay to dismiss entire swaths of people doing extreme amounts of violence because some people went in and destabilized, or because some people may promote it or encourage it. That doesn't dismiss it. So please don't dismiss something so dark and evil in that way. And again, not all Muslims, of course. But what's interesting to me is I saw this video, and here's a guy who is a former Muslim from the Middle East, from Muslim territories, and from Iran. And he gave us this dose of reality to those of us living in the West. So here's what he says in his own words. He says, a Persian Christian over here, born and raised in Iran, living in America, ex-Muslim, have some great knowledge and a couple good resolutions for y'all. And I hope we can make everything change for the better. And he talks about this 80-20 thing. He says, sure, let's just say 80% of Muslims are the good kind, right? The non-violent, the non-jihadis and all of that. And only 20% are the radicalized, intense sort of Islam. He says, even if that, which he says is pretty generous and not probably very fair, because he says, even if you could say only 20% are actively involved in, violence and jihad on that level, that there's another like maybe 20 to 40% that are waiting to say, like, we'll take your place when you fall. And that's a crazy number. Now we're getting up to like half or more, right? So anyways, that's his take. That's what he says about Islam as a ex-Muslim living in the West. He says that's at least 400,000 actively violent people. He said that's huge. It's terrible. He said it means something in your teachings or in your path, in your Quran, in the teachings of your prophets, of your imams, of your muftis. Something is wrong. He says it's time for you to have an internal dialogue and figure it out and abrogate some parts of this culture, these teachings, whatever you have to do. He said Christianity went through something similar, right? After the Dark Ages, after the Reformation, after the Inquisition, he said it's time for Islam to do the same thing, or you do not belong to the West, he says. You don't belong to the West, and you won't belong to modern culture and society if you can't reform these beliefs. In Western countries, you can't be here, he says. You can go back to your Islamic countries if you want and keep it there, but you don't get to keep expanding. He says you don't get to preach Islam in other areas. Your jihad isn't going to work. You're making yourself look bad. You're making your community look bad. It doesn't matter what you say to defend it. He says it doesn't matter if you don't like it. He says even to the 80% of you that aren't in that violent category yet, he says you are promoting it by being a part of it. And I think that's pretty interesting. And I don't think he's necessarily wrong. He said that 20%, they belong to you. You don't get to just discount them. He said, again, Christianity went through reform because it wanted to do better. You need to do the same and say these 20% of you aren't part of this, or we're not going to be part of this, right? He says, where do they come from? They don't come out of space. They're yours. They come out of your religion. They're of your religion. Your religion reinforces everything. It tells them to do what they're doing. He says, since they were kids, they were taught these things. They were taught to jihad. They were taught to death to America, kill the Jews, etc., kill the Christians, etc. He says that's all in the Quran. It's in your holy teaching. So you can't be mad when that's what happens. That's your religion. He's like, take responsibility for it. He cites the verses. He says there's verses that tell you to go raping. There's verses that tell you to go killing. There's verses that do this. He says Christianity, even if it has some that sound similar, they have teachings that supersede it and they say so. And so you can't go back to it. But in Islam, they don't. He says, so why do you have stuff like this? It's time that you need to understand this is actually in your religion. He said, this is why he became a Christian. He became a Christian because it transcended that, because Jesus came and changed everything, right? And said, no, we don't do it like this anymore. Here's how we do it now. And that became the law, right? So yeah, he talks about all of these people in Islam who were fighting actually against the Islamic invasion and against the Islamic corruption, and trying to get people to see that Jesus superseded this too. And that in fact, the Quran, if you were going to believe it, teaches you to go to the Bible first and to Jesus first, which is fascinating. Right? He says that's why you ended up with Coptic Christians and some of these other sects of Christianity, because they were a Muslim and they saw that truth and they even went to Christianity. So again, this is, if you're the religious type, these are the arguments you need to hear. If you want to stay away from religion altogether, great. At least know Islam may not be the best choice. If you were going to choose something that helps civilization, helped humanity have a cohesiveness that can get it through darkness and into a transcendent state, probably Islam isn't the one. Even Islam points back to Christianity and Jesus, and otherwise leads you into holy war that is full of violence and rape. So really interesting. This was a post I found, and this guy's saying this. I loved to see that perspective. I think it's really easy for, especially the leftist, progressive, like cluster B sort of society we're in, to be like, everyone is fantastic except Christians. Islam is wonderful, but Christians suck. You know, Buddhism is great, but Christians suck. Hinduism is fantastic. Taoism is fantastic. Literally everything is better than Christianity, which sucks and is horrible, and screw white people. Right? Screw America, screw white people, and screw Christianity. Those are the safe things to say in 2025. You know, but here's this person who is like, no, as a Muslim, an ex-Muslim, I came to Christianity. Here's why, and here's what's wrong with your religion. Fantastic. It's very interesting. Here's this other take. This person is saying Christianity is the only religion the devil didn't create. Of whatever, again, you don't have to take this as there's an actual devil or there's an actual Satan. I know demons are real. I know that Satan exists. I know that there are definitely things that those energies would like to have people be a part of rather than Christianity, because Christianity actually transcends demons and evil and brings people beyond their reach. And so there's another version of this same thing, saying it in a slightly different way. They said Christianity is the only religion the devil didn't create. And they go through these arguments that they have. And, you know, you could agree or disagree. It doesn't matter to me. I don't care. But they're like, whoa, this is crazy to think. They were like, have you ever tried to come at evil or a demon with Buddha's name? They don't care. With like Taoism or with whatever, they don't care. It doesn't stop them from doing anything. In fact, many of these traditions will acknowledge that there are sort of you know, they'll call them jinn or other things, and that you just kind of can't like do anything about them. You got to hope they don't come after you, and that's the best you got. Whereas Christianity is like, oh no, we have sovereignty over them, and by the way, invoke this name and they're done. Which, by the way, in my experience, works 100% of the time. So very interesting. But what they also point out is something I've pointed out a million times before. And this is another thing that drove me into understanding there really is something about Christianity. There really is something about Christ that is specifically good and transcendent beyond all things. And part of what led me to that was seeing you can attack Christianity on any platform. You can attack Christianity in any way. You can desecrate Christ. You can put him as a tranny, black, lesbian on the cross, and that's fine. You can do anything to mock it. You can make him gay. You can do anything to mock Christianity. You can denigrate it, desecrate it in any way, and that is acceptable in our society. Movies do it, songs do it, media does it. All social media will allow you to do it without calling you, without giving you a strike, without removing your post. Always it's allowed. You cannot do the same to Islam. Go try it. You'll be banned in a moment. People will attack you. It's wrong. You're a bigot. You're racist. You're horrible. You're oppressive. You do it to Christianity, they'll celebrate it. They'll allow it. Go do it to Taoism. They'll tell you you're wrong and that you can't do it. They'll do it to anything and they'll say how horrible of you, what a bigot you are, how hateful you are. But you do it to Christianity, you're totally good. Why is that? Why is that? Why is it that you were raised to react negatively to it, to reject the church, to call it nonsensical, to diss it in every possible way? Why is that okay? But you are not allowed to do the same to mosques, right? Or to ashrams. Why is that? That's a fascinating fact about our modern society, isn't it? Why do they hate Christianity so much that it is literally the only religion you're allowed to mock? You can not even attack Santeria or voodoo, but you can attack Christianity. It's because of the power that it holds to transcend everything. Clip that. And so they talk about this, and I've talked about it many times. And while I don't necessarily agree that it's exactly true that like the devil created other religions, I will say that it is exactly true that those religions may be pushed and allowed at a higher rate in today's quite evil and fallen society because they don't have the power to actually uplift you and allow you to transcend everything material and everything fallen. But Christ does. Beyond religion, before religion. And this is interesting too. So this is a guy who's out of China. He's Chinese, or rather, I think he's South Korean now, but he is Chinese. And he is a Christian, which is a growing thing, which is also one of the things that is heavily suppressed in China. You can't bring in Bibles, you can't be Christian, and it's deeply persecuted. So again, Christians are actually the most persecuted in the world, but that's one of the most suppressed facts that you're not supposed to know. So this Chinese guy, he is Joel Lee, joellee.arc on Instagram, and he has a YouTube channel too. I think you can find. I haven't looked that deeply into him, but he seems very Christian and pretty cool. He talks about, he says the oldest written language still used today actually preserves the book of Genesis. He says that's right, the Bible. Harvard's Yenching Library dates ancient Chinese to about 2500 BC. He says this almost the same time as the Tower of Babel dispersion in 2218 BC. Before Buddhism, before Taoism, which dates around 500 BC, ancient China had worshipped one creator god. They called him Shangdi. One creator god, no idols, no polytheism, no multiple gods, only one true God. And because China was geographically isolated for almost 2,000 years, their earliest worldview remained untouched. Inside their oldest characters, we see Genesis encoded. The word he says for tempter, mo, is garden, the symbol. So if you know Chinese, it's all symbols kind of mashed together. And so many symbols of single words will be put together to create a sort of symbolic meaning. And the word mo is the symbol for garden, for man, for secret, and for two trees. Like, how is that possible, right? This is the Garden of Eden story encoded into the word for tempter, which is the story of the snake and the fall from the Garden of Eden, right? So again, this is not Christianity as this small dogmatic worldview, but Christianity as the story of mankind, as the story of your soul, and now the redemption and reclamation of your soul. And that's the story of Christianity, that it actually predates what we call Christianity itself. And it's the story that's been being told all throughout time and space. It's why it's reflected in the stars, in your body, in the periodic table of the element, and in Chinese characters that predate even Christianity. Clip that. So that's that symbol, mo, tempter, garden, man, secret, two trees. The word for ship, he said, Chuan, is vessel plus 8 people, which in the story of Noah and his 8 and the 7 other people, there's 8 people on this boat. That's the word for ship in China. How is that possible, right? He's saying Genesis is encoded in the Chinese language. Righteousness, the word for righteousness, he says, is ye, and it's lamb over me, or Christ over me. That's righteousness, right? That's encoded in the Chinese language. So we've got this tempter, right? The man, the two trees, the secret. We've got this ye, the lamb over me. We've got the word for ship with a man and 8 people. And these are all encoded in Chinese symbols. He says that's the gospel. These aren't coincidences. For 4,000 years, Chinese has preserved the same history that Moses wrote. Christianity is not a Western religion, he says. It began in the Middle East. God never left the Chinese people without a witness, he says. And Chinese are unknowingly prophesying and proclaiming the gospel in their words. So really fascinating to see that that is, again, it's universal. It's universal. And Christianity, again, is the progression of, we call it Christianity. If you gave it another name, it wouldn't matter. It's this idea, it's this concept that we're being brought back to an understanding of who and what we are, our connection to each other, to nature, to soul, to God. And Christ is a representation of that. It's the thing that can draw us back to it. It's the thing and the force that can bring us back from our fallen state in matter and back to source or God or heaven or whatever you want to call it. Clip that. And the Quran, like I said, even confirms that the Torah or the gospel are divine revelations. So I just learned this the other day from some random video that I didn't even mean to watch, which is always how it happens with me. I'm just, again, accidentally pushed into these understandings over and over again my whole life. Not what I was seeking, not what I asked for. I'm sure I asked for it without knowing, but you know what I mean, consciously at least. This wasn't my intention to end up here. And the Quran confirms the Torah and the Gospel as divine revelations. The Torah being the first 5 books, which are also held sacred by Judaism, and the Gospel being not necessarily held sacred by Judaism, only held sacred in the Bible, we thought. But the Quran actually says, no, those are primary. They came first, and they're divine revelation, and you should refer to them first. They count as primary. It confirms what came before the Quran, what came before the Prophet Muhammad. And so essentially Muhammad was saying, like, yeah, Jesus and that story, like, that's actually the thing. I'm just kind of here to, like, reinforce that. But that seems to have been twisted over time and now degraded into whatever Islam has become, unfortunately. So modern Muslims believe the scriptures and the Bible have been, decrepit and corrupted over time. And so we can no longer trust the Bible. And so we only trust our holy books. But that isn't what Muhammad said. So if you really go back to study the Quran, it will send you back to the Bible. And so even Christianity will transcend this too. Fascinating, fascinating. Here's verses of the Quran that validate the Holy Bible is not corrupted. This is a Reddit thread. So if you want to know, you can hear some of these. This is chapter 7, verse 157. Those who follow the messenger, the unlettered prophet, whom they find mentioned in their own scriptures and the law and the gospel, for he commands them what is just and forbids them what is evil. He allows them as lawful what is good and pure and prohibits them from what is bad and impure. He releases them from their heavy burdens and from the yokes that are upon them. So it is those who believe in him, honor him, help him, and follow the light which is sent down with him. It is they who will prosper. It's telling you to follow Christ. And it goes on and on. There's many of these, actually, this person has laid out here. Chapter 8, verse 27, chapter 6, verse 114, 115, chapter 5, verse 43, chapter 5, verse 47, chapter 5, verses 68. All of these refer you back to Jesus in the Bible. Now, I'll actually go here first. I wrote another article. This is about 6 months ago on the Substack. It's called Dogma Always Dies. And it's bringing you into an interesting exploration of what Christ actually is. I say in Christendom, it is considered an absolute fact that Jesus Christ was the living flesh of God, directly God, and represented in flesh as such, referred to as the Son of God. It was not always so. And so I go into the Roman Empire's dogma dictated, the Council of Nicaea, which did actually perhaps, maybe not corrupt, but definitely didn't allow a lot of, apocryphal texts into the official Bible, and definitely decided what was and wasn't okay to believe about Christ and Christianity. And so there's a lot to explore there. And I love reading the apocryphal texts. They're really interesting. What was left out of the Bible, but prior to that, there was a lot of different ideas of what Christ was. And so here are some of them. There's the Trinitarian doctrine, consubstantiality, and God incarnate. There's all descriptions of the Nicene Council's canonized dictate that Christianity would hold Jesus Christ as the flesh of God, God in a body, not a human. And if human, then subsumed by God's presence, so much so that it didn't matter anymore. The Son of God as born through immaculate conception of Mary, no different from God taking form and walking among us mere humans. That's their sort of what they decided in the Council of Nicaea. But some contending versions, we had Arianism. This was the belief that Christological doctrine, which rejected the traditional notion of the Trinity and considers Jesus to be a creation of God, therefore distinct from God. And that's considered heretical by many. Docetism, the doctrine that the phenomenon of Jesus, his historical and bodily existence, and above all, the human form of Jesus, was merely semblance without any true reality. So it's kind of like you could appear to be physical, but you're not. And this is my experience that I've had with many ascended masters or spiritual beings, that they can appear in form. This is my direct experience in this life, that they can appear as form, but they're not actually. They can just as easily no longer be form, and now they're whatever else they are, right? It's pure spirit. And that's sort of this idea of docetism. That was one of the ideas of what Jesus was. Monophysitism. Monophysitism teaches that, and I might be mispronouncing all of these because I've only read them, by the way, so I don't know how you actually say most of these. Teaches that Christ had one divine nature, not two separate human and divine natures. It was perceived as blurring or subsuming Christ's humanity within his divinity, and therefore seen as heretical. Right? So he's supposed to be both human and God somehow. And it's like, how are we going to make this work? And so people had all these different ideas. Nestorianism, the belief in teaching that Jesus was two separate persons, one divine and one human. Two separate persons. They reject the title Theotokos, or God bearer, for Mary, preferring Christotokos, or Christ bearer, or Anthropotokos, man bearer. In essence, Mary is said to have bore a child who was later a representative of Christ, the Son of God, but not him himself. Adoptionism was Jesus was born merely human and was adopted as the Son of God at his baptism or resurrection. One of those two, right? At some moment, God was like, all right, now you're the Son of God. Here's this Christ-like energy or consciousness to come through you. But he was man before then. Ebionism promotes Jesus as a human prophet and the Messiah, but rejects any level of divinity. There's no divine at all. It's just a guy who just, is representing these highest sort of ideals. A teacher and a human guide. That's probably the least close to it, in my opinion. Gnosticism, many Gnostic sects held various beliefs, often viewing Jesus as a divine being who imparted secret knowledge or gnosis to his followers. Some Gnostics denied the physical reality of Jesus, suggesting he only appeared to be human, similar to that docetism we were talking about. Some thought of Jesus as purely the consciousness, logic, or wisdom that would lead any being toward enlightenment. And still others thought Christ as a form any of us could achieve by following the path taught by Jesus. In fact, Jesus says that. So I would say that we should probably believe him. Apollinarianism, this view suggested Jesus had a human body, but not a human mind or spirit. So his flesh was real, but otherwise he wasn't human in any other way and purely divine. Manichaeism is an interesting one, heavily persecuted in the Inquisition, said Jesus is considered one of the four prophets of the faith, along with Zoroaster, Gautama Buddha, and Mani. Mani maybe. And so this is another, of the concept that there's a Christ consciousness and that it comes into human form every so often or once in age, some believe, and that is, the divine coming in. And at that point, you are no longer fully human because you've transcended that, but you were human before that moment, right? And so that's sort of the awakening, right? The highest self, all of that. And again, Jesus said, follow me. So maybe, right? Mystic syncretic Christ, which is perhaps closest to where I'm at. It says the cosmic Christ refers to the idea that Christ exists beyond the historical figure of Jesus, represents a universal presence that can manifest in various forms throughout history, emphasizing the ongoing relevance of Christ's teachings and the idea that divine guidance can appear in different cultural and spiritual contexts. It does rely on the concept of reincarnation, true reincarnation, not just rebirth, I will mention. In which a specific enlightened consciousness may choose to return to incarnation. It holds that Christ consciousness is reborn in different forms over and over, guiding humanity back to reunification and reintegration with God or the divine. Amen. At the same time, Christ consciousness, it says, can bloom within any being, even after birth. And I say at the end, dogma always dies. There's no real way to keep dogma alive. They tried real hard in the Council of Nicaea, right? But really, you can't keep it going forever. The human mind is guided by the Holy Spirit, the eternal consciousness that permeates all things and all times, whatever name it may be given. And therefore, all people have access to the Logos or the wisdom that draws us always back to the truth. Whether of ill or good intent, the Nicene Council shut down thought on the topic of the nature of Christ, a topic that was once a bustling discussion within which it was safe to have and hold varied perceptions. And that was early Christianity, right? You were safe to say all of these things. And people are like, yeah, that's not really what I think, but that's cool. And then the Council of Nicaea came and was like, this is the truth. And then they centralized power even more. And eventually they were just killing people who didn't agree. Very not Christ-like, right? It takes us a while as humans to really get what was given to us and live it. But that's how it tends to go. I say, driven underground were every set of possibilities outside the one narrow view that Jesus was the one and only singular and eternal representation of God in flesh here on earth. Though we have always been, especially in the present time, we are free to explore what Jesus Christ was or wasn't. We're free to hold any belief about Jesus Christ, consciousness, reincarnation, enlightenment, or any other topic. We will not be tortured, then burned alive, and sent to hell on earth by an empire of captors for our beliefs. Whether we are Christians or not, we can enjoy what pre-Nicene Council peoples enjoyed, a multifaceted discussion on the nature, origin, and mission of Yeshua or any other Christic figure. Let freedom ring. And speaking of Yeshua, here's another spelling you may not be familiar with. I found this from Christian Rebis, whoever that is, on Yeshua, a grand architect of the universe. And this is my favorite take on Christ. I know I just said, that universal Christ consciousness. Well, this goes beyond that and explains what the Christ consciousness actually is. And so, part of what some traditions say, and this specifically here follows the traditional Martinist order, which is another ancient order, on their view. And so they have this phrase, which is, to the glory of Yeshua, grand architect of the universe. And it's interesting because if you know anything about conspiracy and everybody's just like very deep into the Illuminati, grand architect being the sort of symbol of the Masons, and why are they obsessed, who is the grand architect, and they take it towards like the demiurgic of where there's like a god but he's actually like a Satan or a demon and he rules the physical world and that's who they're worshiping. And when you read it in this light, I don't know that Masons would have this exact phrase, Yeshua, grand architect of the universe. But if they did, it would at least let you know who the architect they're talking about is. And it might dispel some of your fears that they're all Satan worshipers. So definitely in the traditional Martinist order, they seem to be deeply aligned with and reverent towards Yeshua, which is Jesus's name, or title rather. Jesus's name is not Jesus. It's a title. Yeshua is a title, and the title means grand architect of the universe. That means literally there's a conception in which Jesus is the aspect of God that came in to create the whole universe. God beyond material reality is still God, and the part of God that decided to create the universe so that the fallen human soul would have a place to work it out and perhaps redeem itself and come back to God, that's Jesus. That's Yeshua. And the grand architect of the universe, thank God, gave us this gift of being able to reclaim and redeem ourselves and perhaps everyone else with us. So I'm not going to read this article for you. You can find it if you want. It is called Yeshua, and it's not spelled Yeshua. It's spelled Ieschoua, Yeshua, Grand Architect of the Universe by Christian Rebis. And so you can check it out, but it does bring you back to this concept, in which case Jesus Christ would be one of many avatars in which this aspect of God chose to come and represent itself to help humanity remember what it's doing here and call it back home. And in that case, thank God, Christ is Lord and gave us this opportunity to remember ourselves and come back home. And until you remember yourself, celebrate Christmas because it's a wonderful time of year, because it's your shared culture in this culture, and because it matters that you have one and use it, and you travel well. Aim for balance and always look inside first.
To these screens, it's a plot to drop the IQ. Fighting amongst each other over rumors that don't like you. Prefer us trapped in melancholy with the wood ones of holly. Suggestions that obliterate to camouflage the folly. Attempted mental robbery, executed sloppily. The hypocrisy, this mockery, and walk the talk with me. Put the hands up to touch the Akasha, cause you know deep down there's something bigger than your wallet.